let's focus on this summer.
Yeah.
And obviously they've got a big decision coming with Dillon Brooks. He's going into free agency. And it's not a secret. This front office has made attempts to upgrade from Dillon Brooks.
Yeah.
They threw 4 first-round picks at the Brooklyn Nets, hoping to get Mikal Bridges after the Kevin Durant trade. By the way, wisely, I think if this team has
Yeah.
Mikal
Oh,
Bridges, this is a different situation, a different
yeah.
series, and I thought that at the time, and after we saw what he's done with the Nets, you think it even more. They had significant interest in OG Anunoby.
hmm
Uh, they weren't able to get that done despite their willingness to part with multiple draft picks. Uh, I think it's pretty reasonable to conclude that they will continue to aggressively use their picks. They have
Oh,
all
yeah.
their own picks plus the Warriors in 2024. They're going to use those. They don't need any more developmental players. They need, impact, like you say, veteran, ready to win right now type of players. And then they've taken shots at getting potential Dillon Brooks replacements in the draft. Zaire Williams, they moved up to draft him at number 10 overall a
hmm
couple of drafts ago. After his rookie year, it looked like, hey, let's see how this next year goes. Maybe he might be
Year
ready.
3, he could get it. Yeah.
Yeah, this speaking of progress not being linear, it's obviously been a step back. He cannot factor into that decision this summer. David Roddy has certainly shown signs of being a contributor. It has contributed late in the season. He's not ready to be a 30-plus per game starter. So, they're going to continue taking swings in the trade market, I'm sure. If they're not able to get something done, if there's more swings and misses, what do you do about Dillon Brooks in free agency?
I mean, and when we say if they're not able to get anything done, I'm talking about with some other free agents too. Like
Yeah.
because you Dillon Brooks is a great wing defender, and I've said it.
Mm-hmm.
Wing defenders don't grow on trees. The elite ones.
Yes.
There's just not that many in the league. The ones who can guard these top tier players and hold them 7-8 points below their average and 7 percentage points below their field goal percentage. He's one of those guys capable of doing that. But at the end of the day, this Lakers series has shown it. We've seen it in periods in the regular season. They're sagging off of him.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear Taylor Jenkins talking after the game, and he's saying words like spacing.
Yes.
Well, Taylor Jenkins knows he's not going to call his guy out, but it's very clear. One of the biggest reasons why those spacing issues is happening, other than execution that every coach
Right.
says, is the fact that you have a guy that LeBron James, when he's guarding him, or whoever the case may be. But
They'll
I
put
remember,
D'Angelo Russell on him because they're
yeah,
going to put their weakest defender on him, and
they're
he's
gonna
going to
put
have a
their
foot in the
and he's
paint.
just gonna sink his feet in the paint and
Mm-hmm.
just move around freely. And Dillon, like we saw Dillon pass up some shots. Like you don't see that too much because
I mean, we
that's when
also
you knew,
saw him airball a shot by about 3 feet.
and it was bad. And it was like that's when you knew, okay, it's probably in his head a little bit. But getting back to the offseason, I think you're spot on. Like with the trades, Zach Kleiman went as far as saying, look, people think just because we didn't get a deal, we weren't aggressive.
Well, they were
They
aggressive.
just they were aggressive. They were aggressive. They just didn't get the right deal. But I think you gotta go for some other guys. Dillon Brooks is great for this team. And at the end of the day,
I
if
don't
you
think Dillon Brooks is great for this team anymore, but go on.
he's great. He's great for the heart and soul perspective. Now I'm talking
Mm,
about on the court. You got to get a change. That's what I'm thinking. Like the 3-point shooting is look. You already Ja is who he is from 3-point line. You
right.
can't have two guys, in on your perimeter, below league average 3-point percentage shooters,
Right.
and now and expect Desmond Bain every game to make 4 or 5 3-pointers. Like that's just unrealistic. So I think at the end of the day, you swing. They're going to swing hard on the trade market. There'll probably be a couple wings out there in free agency that makes sense. At decent at a decent mid-level exception type deal.
Mm-hmm.
But Dillon Brooks, I think, is your last resort from that
I,
perspective. You only bring him back. It's like, hey, look, we swung and missed on these guys via trade. We couldn't get these two guys in free agency. And then at that point, even then, if you bring them back, it's got to be a 1-year deal, right? Like you can't, you just can't. You talk about the progress of this team. There's the potential for them to really get this thing going really soon with the way that Desmond Bain progressed, with the way that Jaren progressed, and then Ja just being himself. But it's those little holes like that. Like if guys are just going to sag into the paint when Dillon Brooks is at the 3-point line, then that makes things hard for Ja. So
yeah,
you got to put better roster construction around those guys. And there are some other guys who can defend and shoot who can kind of fit, that mold, I think.
I hear what you're saying about the 1-year deal. I just think if you have Dillon Brooks, knowing they've tried to replace him over and over and over again, you're asking for problems. Seriously, I think it's reached a point where they need to move on from Dillon Brooks.
Just all out move on.
The priority for this front office needs to be, let's figure out how to replace him, because it is he is an outstanding wing defender. If I had a vote, he would be a first-team all defensive player for me. But I think it's interesting that he's not the primary defender on LeBron James anymore this series.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's not the primary defender on LeBron James, why is he in the game? Because he is, according to ESPN stats and information, he is 5 of 20 on wide open threes, 25% on, hey, we don't care if you take that shot, because we're going to pack the paint to prevent Ja from getting any kind of space going. So, and then, there's throughout his tenure with the Grizzlies, there's been a lot of games where shot selection. We can go back to a 5 of 19 last year in Golden State. I mean, there's a couple of game one ridiculous pull-up threes that are essentially outlet passes for the other team. And then I agree with you that he is a big part of this heart and soul that I call, kind of the snarling swagger of this team, the competitive fabric of this team. The competitive fabric of this team is soiled, though. Like Dillon being, and look, Dillon the villain is what his teammates call him. That is his persona. That is not a media created thing. The media presses his button, which is record, to get him to pop off. That's all you got to do, record. And suddenly he doesn't want to talk anymore because it's blown up in his face. But he's the one who wanted to pick verbal fights with LeBron James, with Draymond Green. He's sought attention. He's wanted attention. He's the one who picked a literal fight with Donovan Mitchell. He's the one who got himself suspended 3 different times this year, twice for technical fouls, once for the nut shot to Donovan Mitchell, and then the little scrap that broke out after that. He's the one who got himself suspended last year during the playoffs for a blatant cheap shot that injured Gary Payton II. If the competitive fabric is chaos for a franchise that you're concerned about your leader's immaturity, you've got to change the competitive fabric. And I just think look, Dillon Brooks had a very good run with the Memphis Grizzlies. I think it's time for that run to end. And I don't think that you can have him as a member of your core and expect to make a deep playoff run. So I think this summer's got to be about figuring out a way to replace him.
And it's trended that way. If you just look at the roster constructions, usually tell us a lot, about these teams. If you look at the Grizzlies roster, everyone else is under contract next season. Xavier Tillman has a team option, but everyone else is under contract. All the young guys, John Morant, Desmond Bain, Tyus Jones, Steven Adams, the other older veteran players, everyone is under contract. So with that being said, even Luke Kennard, the way the roster is set up right now, you're going to have to make more moves, through the trade market, or you're going to have to release someone, which if you just go down, it looks like it'll be a tough decision for them to release any of those guys. I mean, you just gave John Conchar, an extension, and he's not giving you, many minutes, in the playoffs and things like that. So there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made, like the Kennedy Chandler decision, for example. Not overlapping real big decision, but at the end of the day, he's a guy that you gave the most guaranteed money for a second-round pick at the time of the signing, and you had to cut him before the end of his first year. So Just the roster construction overall leads me to believe that the fact that, yeah, it's looking real, murky for Dillon and probably a couple other guys
Well, I
because
think that first round pick, they're going to, I would anticipate,
yeah,
try very hard to trade that pick. The draft is in some ways a trade deadline,
yeah,
and
yeah,
we've talked about how aggressive they were before the midseason trade deadline. I expect them to be just as aggressive before the draft.
yeah. They move a lot. They
deadline.
move a lot in the draft. They historically moved a lot through the draft, and you're right. This would, I don't know. I thought last season was the perfect time to trade that. They had 2 first-round picks, trade one of those and go get a vet. But it kind of, they did in reverse. They traded D'Anthony Melton and got a couple younger guys. So sometimes it's hard to figure out what they're thinking, because I thought last season was the chance to go get one of those veteran guys. But you got to do it now, right? You don't even have room for all these draft picks, just to add them on the roster, because the roster is, like we said, full of guys with guaranteed contracts.
Yeah, and change is needed. DeMichael, I appreciate you, brother. We got to jump on a plane, head back to Memphis. We'll see if there's any whoop that trick plane